Okay, so in our last video regarding taking the square root, graphing, in this video we want to graph g of x equals 2 square root of x minus 3 all minus 2. Okay, now like we've been saying in all our videos, if we are not sure what the graph looks like, we can make a t-chart. And it doesn't matter what the function is, you can always make a t-chart. Okay, now your input is your x value and your output is your y value, or in this case we could also say our g of x value. So I'm going to pick some numbers to plug in. Okay, why don't we plug in 0, 3, 12, how about 7, and 10. Okay, those are the numbers. I just guessed on those numbers, and let's see what we get. So the first number we picked 0. Let's see what happens when we plug 0 in. So I've got g of 0 equals, let me zoom out just a little more. G of 0 equals 2 square root of 0 minus 3 minus 2. So g of 0 equals 2 square root of negative 3 minus 2. Well, when you put in your calculator 2 square root of negative 3, it's going to give you an error. So I put in the calculator the square root of negative 3, and here's what it told me: error, non-real answer, right? It said error, non-real answer, and it just wanted me to tell whether I wanted to quit or what I wanted to do. Let's talk about why. I mean, why can't you take the square root of negative 3? Well, square root means what times itself will give me negative 3. Well, a positive times a positive is not negative, and a negative times a negative is not negative. In other words, you can't take the square root of a negative number. And so in that case, our output on our table is, there isn't one, right? We say this would be undefined, undefined. So I can't plug 0 into that function. When I plug 0 into that function, I don't get an output. All right, so now let's plug 3 in, because plugging 0 in didn't help us at all. So let's plug 3 into the function. So I've got g of 3 is 2 square root of 3 minus 3 minus 2. So that's 2 square root of 3 minus 3 is 0 minus 2. Well, the square root of 0 is 0. So it's 2 times 0 minus 2. 2 times 0 is 0 minus 2, which equals negative 2. So when I input 3, my output is negative 2. Okay? Now let's input 12 into the function. Okay, where did I get 12 from? Now I'm inputting 12 into the function. And so I'm going to move up here and I'm going to input 12. So I've got 2 square root of 12 minus 3 minus 2. So that's 2 square root of 9 minus 2. Well, the square root of 9 is 3, so that's 2 times 3 minus 2, which is 6 minus 2, which equals 4. So when I input 12, my output is 4. Now let's plug 7 in to the function. Okay, so I'm going to plug 7 in right up here. And so I've got 2 square root of 7 minus 3 minus 2. So that's 2 square root of 4 minus 2. And the square root of 4 is 2. So I've got 2 times 2 minus 2, which is 4 minus 2, which gives me 2. So when I input 7, my output is 2. So I'm going to write a 2 here. And now let's do our last one, 10. Okay, I'm going to do it right up here to the top right. So I've got 2 times the square root of 10 minus 3 minus 2. So that's 2 square root of 7 minus 2. And so now I'm going to use my calculator to find out what the square root of 7 is. The square root of 7 is 2.65. And so this is 2 times 2.65 minus 2. And so now I'm going to type 2 times 2.65 minus 2. And that gives me 3.3. And so when I input 10, my output is 3.3. So let's go to our table and put 3.3. And so now what we need to do is we need to graph what's in our table. Okay, so my first point, 0 undefined, can't be graphed. But let's graph the point 3, negative 2, which is right 3, and down 2, which is right there. And 12, 4, right 12, and up 1, 2, 3, 4, which looks like it's about right there. And 7, 2, which is right, 4, 5, 6, 7, and up 2, which is right there. And 10, 3.3, right 10, and up 1, 2, 3.3, so somewhere in there, like that. And so you can see the graph does something like that right there. And so we successfully, let me zoom out so I can keep graphing it. We successfully graphed the function. Now let's talk about what each thing does to the function, okay? So notice that because this says x minus 3 right here, my function moved right 1, 2, 3. That's called horizontal shift. Horizontal shift. Okay, let me write it down right here. Horizontal shift. Now the reason it shifted right, because we have x minus 3, don't we? And so you would think that since this is a negative 3, it would go left. But what you do is you ask, what can I plug into this to get 0 out? Well, if I put a 3 right here, 3 minus 3 gives me 0, right? And so that's the reason it went right 3, okay? Now let's look at what else happens to the graph. This minus 2 right here, outside of the radical, see how the radical ends. Notice how the radical goes to right here and stops. And you have a minus 2 outside the radical. Okay, that's called vertical shift. Okay, let's write that down. Vertical shift. And what that is that's up and down shift. Vertical means up and down. And in this case, look at how the graph moved. If the parent graph is right here at 0, 0, the graph went down 1, 2. See it right here? It went down 1, 2. So the vertical shift in this was down 2. Well, you can see why, because look right here. There's a negative 2 outside the radical. And so that number outside the radical controls your vertical shift. And so in this case, it went down 2 because the number outside the radical was a negative 2. If it were positive 2, it would have gone up 2. And so here's our final graph right here. And remember, we used a T-chart to find points to put into it, and recognize that it shifted right 3 and down 2. Okay? It shifted right 3 and down 2. And so if I were to ask you, how does that compare to the parent graph? Well, the parent graph is this graph right here. Okay, and if I were to ask you, how does it compare to the parent graph, you would say it shifted right 3 and down 2.